My thanks to the organisers for the opportunity to contribute to a conversation like this. As a minister of religion, I'd not be surprised if there are one or two here who might be just a little sceptical about the value of my perspective on these issues. It's a scepticism that is, to some degree, justified. Sadly, the church as institution, the church that I represent, has been historically preoccupied with building and maintaining its own places, structures that are often entirely set apart from the public and commercial landscape of the city. What's more, the structures that we have built as the church have communicated more about exclusion and separation than inclusion and invitation. Imposing cathedrals with large and heavy doors have routinely inferred the church's aloofness and distance from the concerns of ordinary people, while our moral proclamations have only cemented that very exclusive air. Still, as a minister to the community of Melbourne, I am concerned to better understand what makes a place genuinely communal, and therefore, in my terms, sacred. In essence, it's a very similar question to the one before us tonight. What creates value in our development of the urban landscape? The word value speaks of those deeper things that sustain the human spirit, both individually and collectively. We are more than a collection of individuals. We are more than consumers or workers. We are citizens. We're a community of people, interdependent, our lives woven together in a particular place. How then do we nurture places that genuinely serve this deeper communal value? To speak of the sacred is to speak in similar terms. Sacred places are those that exist to acknowledge the person in community. Community with others, community with the environment, and community, to use my language, with God, or some higher sense of meaning and purpose. A sacred place is one that publicly names this basic interdependence of the human person. A church is one such place, but there are many others. In one sense, to understand the value or the sacredness of a place, one has to imagine what the city would be like without it. For example, I often wonder what would be lost to the city if all the church buildings were razed and replaced with more commercial development. Even worse, if all the public buildings and spaces, including the forecourt of the State Library or this beautiful Federation Square, was sold off for private development. On one hand, an enormous amount of money might be released for other purposes. On the other hand, by their very presence and difference, these buildings and spaces remind us that there are alternative values at play in our city. There is more to life than can be expressed through commercial or political transaction. Most of the church buildings in the city are there because of an original and generous grant of land from the government of the day. Our city founders believed that a great city is more than a commercial centre. Parks, churches, galleries, museums, libraries, and civic squares acknowledge the city is built for the whole person and the person in community. As Melbourne grows, our challenge is to maintain and extend that commitment to public and communal space as one of the chief markers of the city as a great and a good place. I like to think of public space in the city as a table to which the invitation to sit down is an open and inclusive one. For the past decade, 5 days a week, a small space at the back of the Collins Street Baptist Church is open for lunch and sometimes for dinner. Every day, some 70 to 80 people crowd into a small room for a hot meal and some good company. The space is called Credo Cafe. It is accessed through what used to be one of the most notorious drug dealing laneways of the city. Most of the regulars are homeless, or struggle with addictions or mental illness. They come for a feed, and a place where their difference is not a barrier. Others come from the corporate offices around about, people at the other end of the social spectrum who want to ensure that their own lives are not lived in the isolation of affluence. It is not necessarily a place of intimate connection, but connection no less. For when people share the same place, there is an acknowledgement of each other's humanity. We have to take care of how we set the table at Credo. Paying too much attention to the tablecloths, the china or the glassware can distract us from what's really welcoming to those who come. It's not about creating a beautiful space, but an inclusive place where the food is good and the company is warm. In a sense, placemaking is about the way we set the table of public space, because the way we set the table will determine who feels welcome there. We need always to be careful that our desire for beautiful spaces, as important as that may be, does not diminish our commitment to nurturing places that are genuinely sacred, places that value implicitly and explicitly the diversity and richness of community life in a city like ours. If real value is found in the public expression of our interdependence as a community, then placemaking's most important task, in my view, is to facilitate that interdependence in the very best way that